The screen goes black in your hand. You are sitting on the edge of a bed, staring at the glass, listening to the sudden, deafening quiet of the room. You just sent a message that carried too much weight, too much explanation, too much need. Now there is only the hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic, hollow sound of your own pulse. You have been told that this feeling, this sinking withdrawal, this preference for the quiet, dark corners of your own life means you are broken, an antisocial malfunction requiring therapy and correction. That is a lie. What you are actually experiencing is the autonomic decoupling response. It is a biological failsafe where your nervous system violently severs its tether to the collective herd in order to preserve its own structural integrity. Everything that follows will reveal why this invisible mechanism dictates every relationship, every rejection, and every hierarchy you have ever encountered. This knowledge is not a gift, it is a permanent, crushing weight. Once you see the cold mechanics underneath human affection, you can never unsee them. If you cannot handle the absolute removal of romance from your reality, turn this off now. Human social hierarchies do not operate on the principles of morality, fairness, or mutual understanding. They operate as a ruthless, continuous exchange of bioenergetic leverage. From a macro perspective, the species organizes itself into a massive interlocking grid of dependencies. Every individual is either a node extracting validation or a node providing it. There are no neutral participants. The entire structure of society, the institutions, the social contracts, the very concept of extroversion is a biological imperative designed to keep the herd moving in unison, preventing any single unit from breaking away and destabilizing the collective mass. To the system, independence is a threat. It demands constant low-level emotional bleeding from every participant to ensure compliance. Translate that into your reality. Bring it down to the micro, level a single room, a single interaction, a single conversation at a crowded table. When you walk into a room, an invisible instant calculation occurs among every primate present. Eye contact is measured, posture is scanned. The speed at which you speak, the space you take up, the immediate desperation in your laugh, all of it is catalogued by the primal brains around you in fractions of a second. They are not judging your character. They are assessing your biological positioning. The room operates as a fluid economy of attention. The moment you display a need for the room's approval, you transfer your energy to the collective. You become a resource. The system extracts your compliance and gives you the illusion of belonging in return. Look closely at the dynamics of a negotiation, or even a simple dinner between two colleagues where the underlying status is unresolved. Both figures sit at the table under identical lighting, breathing the same air. The external conditions are perfectly mirrored. One figure leans forward slightly. He fills the empty spaces in the conversation. When a pause stretches too long, a micro-expression of panic flashes across his eyes, and he hastily offers a joke, an anecdote, a rapid stream of unprovoked data. He is leaking energy, compelled by an intolerable internal anxiety to bridge the gap. The other figure does nothing. He remains perfectly still, leaning back, letting the silence expand and fill the room like a heavy gas. He does not nod aggressively. He does not smile to ease the tension. As the seconds tick by, the stillness of the second figure accumulates massive, undeniable weight. The first figure begins to mentally dissolve, his nervous system flooded with the cortisol of unreciprocated effort. He has surrendered his sovereignty without a single threat being uttered. No one was insulted, no one raised their voice. But the hierarchy of the room was permanently rewritten in the space of 3 quiet seconds. This brings us to the first trait of those who truly thrive in isolation, the deployment of silence as environmental pressure. In the psychological machinery of the human animal, silence is not merely the absence of noise. It is registered by the nervous system as a form of sensory deprivation and an implied threat. When you do not provide the expected social echo, when you do not smile back, when you do not rush to fill the void, the other person's brain interprets this as a break in the predictable pattern of the herd. It forces their mind to work furiously to solve the puzzle of your stillness, strip the morality out of it, and look at the math. When someone pulls away from you, or when a group ostracizes you for your quietness, they are not acting out of targeted malice. This is the biological pressure valve. Their brain simply registers your lack of predictable reciprocal signaling as evolutionarily unsafe. In the ancestral environment, a tribe member who did not signal submission or cooperation was a physical danger. Today, that instinct survives as social discomfort. This isn't about manipulation, and it isn't about them being evil. It is just how the machine operates. They are running an ancient software program that demands conformity for survival, and your silence disrupts their code. The deeper implication, the layer underneath the layer, is that those who enjoy isolation have weaponized this disruption. They do not fear the void of social feedback, they rest in it. By refusing to emit the expected signals, they force the external world to orbit around their density. Carl Jung understood this intimately. When he retreated to the shores of Lake Zurich to build his literal stone fortress at Bollingen, he was not merely taking a vacation. He hauled stone, cut wood, and deliberately severed the social signals of the academic world to build an architectural boundary against the psychic contagion of the masses. He understood that to tap into the raw, primal power of the deep unconscious, he had to stop vibrating at the frantic frequency of the collective herd. Stop apologizing for the silence you leave in the room. Here is where it flips. The second trait of those who find power in isolation is the ruthless rationing of access. Let us examine the systemic architecture of availability. Society conditions the individual to believe that constant connection is a virtue. You are trained to respond immediately, to be perpetually reachable, to dissolve the boundaries of your own mind so that others may enter and exit at will. But in the cold mathematical reality of positional power, over-availability is the ultimate biological vulnerability. The system views constant presence not as generosity, but as a lack of options. If you are always there, always ready to absorb the emotional exhaust of the people around you, you cease to be an individual entity. You become a piece of public infrastructure. Think about the relationships you've actually seen. In every dynamic where one person is endlessly available, their perceived value plummets to zero. This is not because the recipient is ungrateful. It is because human perception is fundamentally wired to equate abundance with worthlessness. A resource that requires no effort to extract commands, no respect from the organism extracting it. When you make yourself endlessly accessible, you are broadcasting a signal that your time, your energy, and your focus have no inherent protective barriers. Most people never realize that their pain in these situations is not a result of bad luck or poor character. This is the brutal diagnosis of mispositioning. You feel invisible because you have positioned yourself as a utility. Your frustration, your feeling of being used, these are not moral failings on your part or theirs. The outcome was entirely determined by your position in the hierarchy. You offered unrestricted access, and the biological machine on the other side simply processed that access exactly as it was designed to, by taking it for granted. Character, effort, and intrinsic worth are irrelevant. If you place a feast on the floor in a forest, the predators will eat it without thanking the sky. The logic of position dictates the result. This introduces a phenomenon we must define as the resonance asymmetry. I will return to exactly how this asymmetry traps you later, but understand for now that the difference between emitting a signal and absorbing one is the difference between ruling an environment and being consumed by it. Let us look at the mechanism of opacity as an information asymmetry. In the relational marketplace, information is the raw material of leverage. When you speak too much, explain your motives, and lay your emotional state bare, you are handing the opposition the architectural blueprints to your nervous system. You become a solved puzzle. Opacity, however, creates a vacuum. When you deliberately withhold data about your internal state, you force the other party to project their own anxieties, fears, and insecurities into the dark space you have created. Consider the metaphor of the mirror. A mirror does not speak. It does not explain itself. It merely reflects whatever is placed before it. When a wild animal approaches a perfectly polished mirror in the forest, it becomes confused, agitated, and eventually exhausted by its own reflection. The mirror expends zero energy. It simply holds its rigid, uncompromising structure. In social dynamics, when you become the mirror, when you practice opacity, you reflect the desperate, frantic energy of the herd back onto itself. You become an impenetrable surface. The other person exhausts themselves trying to find a crack in your glass, trying to provoke a reaction that proves you are just as unstable as they are. This is the tactical pressure valve you must understand. When a person becomes agitated by your distance, when they accuse you of being cold or arrogant, they are not actually analyzing your personality. Their brain is merely reacting to the lack of traction. You have removed the friction they usually rely on to orient themselves. They are slipping on the glass. Do not mistake their panic for a valid critique of your character. It is simply the mechanical friction of a biological system realizing it has lost its grip on the target. The deeper implication of opacity is that it forces you into a state of extreme self-reliance. You can no longer rely on the soothing validation of being understood by the herd. You must bear the immense psychological liability of being misunderstood, misjudged, and projected upon, without ever breaking your posture to correct the record. This is the isolation the weak cannot endure. Never explain your absence to those who do not respect your presence. The macro hierarchy of the human collective does not merely extract emotional energy, it also extracts labor, competence, and utility. This is the domain of the prestige pathway. Society creates a pervasive illusion that hard work will be rewarded with warmth, inclusion, and a permanent, safe place by the fire. This is a trap designed to keep the most capable individuals producing indefinitely for the benefit of the many. In the mechanical reality of the species, true prestige is never granted to those who ask for it. It is structurally impossible. The system treats validation as a finite, highly guarded currency. If you require it to function, you are a dependent variable. The system owns you. It weak, Machiavelli. It weakness amlition for mile away. Machiavelli, it we're bind this into the sterile light of a daily environment. Observe a workspace, a creative studio, or a boardroom where value is generated. The environment is entirely transactional, yet masked in the language of teamwork and culture. Every action is measured not by its objective quality, but by the energetic cost of the person performing it. Look at two men under the exact same fluorescent lighting, given the exact same complex, grueling task. The external pressures are perfectly identical. The first man completes the task and immediately looks up. His eyes scan the room. He sighs audibly, stretches his arms, and checks his phone, his body language practically vibrating with the need for someone to acknowledge that he has crossed the finish line. He may even vocalize his exhaustion to a co-worker. In that exact fraction of a second, his work is devalued. His energy dissipates into the room, consumed by the herd as a plea for status. The second man finishes an equally demanding task. He closes the file. He does not look up. He does not sigh. His breathing remains completely flat. He simply shifts his focus to the next objective without a single micro-expression of relief. He requires no echo. He demands no witness. The silence around this second figure begins to accumulate a dense, undeniable gravity. He is not seen as a worker. He is perceived as a machine of natural law. The psychological phenomenon governing this is the scarcity of attention as perceived value. In the evolutionary marketplace, attention is the most critical resource a human organism possesses. When you freely distribute your attention outward, seeking eye contact, seeking a nod, checking for reactions, you signal that your attention is cheap and abundant. You are broadcasting a low-value state. Conversely, when you hoard your attention, fixing it solely on your mission and denying it to the surrounding social matrix, the primitive brains around you instantly register a high-value entity. They perceive scarcity. They recognize that you possess a self-sustaining internal economy. When you begin to operate this way, the people around you will become intensely frustrated. They will call you arrogant, distant, or unapproachable. Here is the brutal truth: they are not offended by your personality. Their nervous system is simply experiencing the withdrawal of your previously cheap attention. They are reacting to a sudden scarcity in their environment, just as an animal reacts to a drying watering hole. This is not about them being toxic, and it is not about you punishing them. It is simply the mechanical friction of the system adjusting to a new baseline of value. Remove the moral blame from their frustration. They are just biological units attempting to balance an equation you have deliberately unbalanced. The deeper layer here is that true prestige is infinitely colder and more demanding than dominance. Dominance can be achieved through a sudden display of force or a loud assertion of boundaries. Prestige requires the sustained, grueling discipline of producing excellence in an absolute vacuum. You must become a ghost to the social economy to become a sovereign in the production economy. Carl Jung understood the absolute necessity of this vacuum. When he was carving the intricate stone monuments at Bollenden, he was not doing it for an audience. He was not taking photographs to send back to the psychoanalytic societies in Vienna or London. He was deliberately starving the collective of his attention. He recognized that to forge concepts heavy enough to alter human history, he had to sever the neurological feedback loop of peer approval. He chose the freezing isolation of the lake because prestige is forged only when the creator forgets the audience exists. Stop trading the lethal edge of your focus for the cheap, fleeting warmth of their applause. We now enter the architecture of consequence. The human social organism survives by mapping its environment. Every individual is a biological algorithm constantly calculating the probable reactions of every other individual. This is how the herd prevents chaos, by ensuring everyone acts in a predictable, standardized loop. The system abhors the unknown. It seeks to categorize you, file you into a specific archetype, and accurately predict your responses. Once you are mapped, you are neutralized. You become a fixed point in their reality, easily navigated around, easily manipulated, and ultimately, easily dismissed. Watch how this operates in the suffocating intimacy of a long-term dynamic, a relationship, a friendship, or a familial bond. Over time, the environment crystallizes. They learn exactly which tone of voice will make you defensive. They know precisely how long it takes for you to break a silence and apologize. They know the exact sequence of words required to extract your compliance or your anger. You are living in an invisible cage built of your own predictable reactions. If you have ever felt profound boredom in your relationships, or if you have watched someone lose respect for you despite your constant sacrifices, replace your self-blame with biological logic. You did not fail them because you weren't good enough or kind enough. The outcome was dictated strictly by your position as a solved puzzle. You allowed your behavioral algorithm to be fully decrypted. You became entirely predictable. To the primal brain, a predictable organism is a conquered organism. There is no biological incentive to maintain high alertness or respect for a creature whose next move is already known. Your misery in that position was not a character flaw. It was the inevitable mathematical result of being entirely mapped. This brings us to the phenomenon of unpredictability as consequence, anxiety. When an organism cannot predict the outcome of an interaction, its nervous system is forced into a state of hyperarousal. It must allocate massive amounts of energy to monitor the threat. By breaking your established patterns, you inject consequence anxiety back into the dynamic. When you suddenly stop answering the text at the usual time, when you do not raise your voice during the argument they engineered, when you simply stare blankly at the insult that usually makes you cry, they will panic. They will accuse you of acting crazy or being manipulative. This is the moment you must remain absolute. They are not genuinely concerned for your mental health. Their biological mapping system has just crashed. They are frantically hitting the keyboard, trying to reboot the old version of you that they controlled. This is not cruelty on their part. It is the panic of a pilot who has lost his instrumental readings. Do not help them navigate. This is the trap most people never escape, and where the resonance asymmetry finally closes its jaws around the reality of your life. Resonance occurs when two frequencies align. For years you have vibrated at the exact frequency of their expectations. You resonated with their demands, and because you resonated, they absorbed your energy without consequence. The asymmetry lies here. The one who sets the frequency controls the environment. By injecting unpredictability, you violently shatter the resonance. You force their nervous system to recalibrate to your new unstable frequency. You are no longer the signal being absorbed. You are the interference they cannot ignore. Those who thrive in isolation use unpredictability not as a game, but as a permanent shield against being consumed. Think of the architecture of a siege. A fortress with a fixed, predictable patrol route is easily breached. The enemy simply watches, times the gaps, and walks through the blind spots. The schedule of the guards becomes the weapon of the invader. But a fortress where the guards change randomly, where the lights extinguish without warning, where silence falls unpredictably, that fortress is terrifying. It forces the enemy to remain in the frozen, exhausting state of the unknown. You must become the darkened fortress. Erase every predictable pattern they have ever used to tame you. The escalation continues into the domain of physical and emotional restraint. In the grand, brutal sweep of evolutionary history, energy conservation is the primary directive of the apex predator. The lower the organism is on the food chain, the more frantic its movements, the more reactive its nervous system. Prey animals dart, twitch, and flee at the snapping of a twig. They are in a perpetual state of energetic hemorrhage. The apex position, however, is defined by the absolute economy of motion. The system respects only what it cannot easily move. At the macro level, social hierarchies test for this constantly. Society is a relentless machine designed to poke, prod, and provoke the individual, searching for the reactive twitch that signals prey status. Narrow the lens to a single, high-stakes conversation. An environment where reputations are being quietly dissected. Someone throws a veiled insult in your direction. It is masked as a joke, delivered with a smile, but the biological intent is clear. It is a probe. They are testing the structural integrity of your emotional armor. The entire room subconsciously pauses, waiting for the ricochet. The psychological phenomenon here is restraint as an implied threat. When you are provoked and you do not flush with anger, when you do not immediately fire back a defensive justification, your brain is sending a terrifying signal to the collective. In the wild, if an animal is struck and does not flinch, the attacker immediately assumes the prey is either toxic, armored, or immensely powerful. The absence of a defensive reaction is registered as a dominant position. The person who threw the insult will often laugh nervously or attempt to fill the silence they just created. They will suddenly backpedal. Understand this clearly. They are not feeling remorse. Their primal brain has simply registered your total lack of reaction as a profound environmental danger. They threw a rock into what they thought was a shallow pond, and they heard no splash. The terrifying realization that they have dropped a stone into a bottomless trench triggers an automatic de-escalation protocol. They are not evil for testing you. Testing is the biological imperative of the weak seeking to locate the boundaries of the strong. Forgive the probe, but do not relieve their discomfort. The deeper implication is a state of permanent internal isolation. To master restraint, you must sever the cord between your ego and the external world's perception of it. You can no longer afford the luxury of feeling misunderstood. You must sit inside the burning house of their misjudgments and refuse to put out the fire. This is the isolation that crushes the ordinary mind. You become a vault. You contain the kinetic energy of their disrespect and let it dissolve into the absolute zero of your internal architecture. Consider the physics of the deep ocean. On the surface, the water is chaotic, dictated by the wind, the storms, and the frantic thrashing of millions of organisms. The surface is reactive. But miles below, in the abyssal zone, the water is pitch black, freezing, and utterly still. The pressure down there is so immense that it would instantly crush the fragile, reactive organisms of the surface. To survive in isolation is to sink below the reactive zone. Let the storms rage above you. Let the small fish tear each other apart in the shallow waters. Down in the dark, you do not move unless you choose to move. When Jung analyzed the shadow self, he was not teaching people to be nice. He was teaching them to integrate this exact abyssal pressure. He knew that the unintegrated man reacts to everything, a puppet to his own suppressed insecurities. But the integrated man, the one who has faced the absolute terror of his own isolated depths, no longer reacts to the petty provocations of the collective. He simply watches them play out their biological programming, completely untouched by their frantic noise. Never bleed on someone who is waiting with a cup. We arrive at the final freezing altitude of the hierarchy. The ultimate mechanism of power is not found in how you manage your presence, but in how you architect your absence. The biological collective is entirely dependent on continuous visual and auditory confirmation to maintain its structure. If a unit is not seen, it ceases to exist in the active memory of the herd. This is the ultimate fear of the modern human: irrelevance. The system leverages this fear to keep everyone constantly signaling, posting, appearing, and proving they are still part of the grid. But for the sovereign entity, the removal of the physical self from the equation is the ultimate declaration of immunity. Visualize a social gathering that you have attended consistently for years. The dynamics are set, the roles are played. Now visualize the physical space when you simply stop arriving. No dramatic exit, no grand announcement of your departure. You simply cease to occupy the coordinates. For the first few days, the system registers a glitch. Questions are asked. But soon the space closes over where you used to be. This is the deployment of absence as a social signal. In the mathematics of power, absence is the heaviest element. When you remove yourself entirely, you become a blank canvas upon which the system projects its ultimate anxieties. You are no longer a participant, you are a ghost hovering over the architecture. You become immune to their drama, their shifting alliances, and their petty extractions. When they eventually stop reaching out, when the invitations dry up and the silence becomes permanent, do not mistake this for a defeat. Here is the paradox. Their indifference is not a rejection of your value. It is the biological system acknowledging that you have successfully decoupled from its gravitational pull. A satellite that breaks orbit is no longer pulled by the Earth. It floats in the terrifying, magnificent void. They are not abandoning you, they simply lack the atmospheric pressure to reach you. Picture two figures realizing their social circle is toxic. The first attempts to fix it. He calls meetings, sends long paragraphs of text explaining his grievances, and begs for the group to change its dynamics. He is emotionally exhausted, still tethered to the very machine that is grinding him down. He dissolves in reactive emotion, fighting a biological tide he cannot control. The second figure realizes the toxicity and simply evaporates. He packs his things, changes his routines, and disappears. He offers no explanations. He demands no closure. The first figure dies fighting the maze. The second figure simply steps over the wall. The true cost of this knowledge is the absolute death of hope that the old way will ever work again. You can never return to the warm, blind ignorance of the herd. You will sit in rooms full of laughing people and see only the gears turning, the levers pulling, the endless, desperate exchange of validation. You will carry the weight of being the only awakened entity in a room full of sleepwalkers. This is the price of sovereignty. Let them forget you until the exact moment they are forced to remember. This brings us back to the silence of the room, the glowing screen, and the autonomic decoupling response you experienced in the opening seconds. That sudden, violent urge to pull away was never a malfunction. It was the biological answer staring you in the face, operating flawlessly. Your nervous system was attempting to save you from a parasite you could not yet see. Everything described here, the silence, the opacity, the unpredictable rhythms, the terrifying restraint, and the absolute absence, has always been inside you, waiting for the moment you finally realized the social contract was a predatory illusion. The decoupling was not a breakdown, it was an awakening. The version of you that required their validation to breathe is now dead. It is no longer relevant. We do not mourn it, we do not analyze it. It was simply an outdated operating system, a fragile piece of software that your biological hardware has permanently outgrown. You can no longer operate on the frequency of a beggar. From this moment forward, the masses are nothing more than background systems. They are automatic, mechanical units moving blindly through hierarchies they will never possess the optics to see. You will no longer lower your density to make them comfortable in their sleep. Your only directive now is the mission. You are commanded to architect a purpose so structurally massive, so deeply rooted in your own isolated competence, that it requires absolutely no one else to sustain it. Self-mastery is the ultimate gravitational force. When you build a density of competence, the universe is forced to orbit you. Iron, understand the nature of what this is. Continued exposure to this transmission is access to the architecture. It is not a community. It is not a support group. I am not your friend, and you are not a follower. Those who remain here are simply the few who can no longer pretend a mechanism does not exist. You will take these blueprints, you will apply the pressure, and you will survive the isolation. There is nothing left to discuss.